Oh, well, goody. Let you know now. All right. So everybody has to be on good behavior because we're recording it now. Okay. So let's kind of get started here. I'll keep an eye on the people as they start joining up. But I guess we can start with some welcome to all of our new members and first timers. Thank you for joining us. Let's see. We'll let Radalina go first as far as announcements, since she's probably the farthest away in Spain.
Am I the only one in Europe in the group?
Only one admitting it, I guess, at this point.
Yes. Oh, it's exciting. I'm virtually coming to the United States with you guys.
That'll be great.
James, I lost you for a second. Did you ask me a question?
No, just go ahead and tell people about your group.
Okay.
Then,
okay, well, I really invite you all to come and join us in one of the next sessions. I'm not sure whether from now on it will always be on Thursday, but I will keep with the Thursdays with my regular talks and those networking events that we regularly do as well. So the networking ones are just general meetings when we don't have a topic, but we meet to see each other and to discuss what the latest in our work. Everybody has a chance to share what they're doing, post about their website or any other events you may be organizing yourselves. And so just a chance to meet other astrologers or people that are studying astrology. Usually, want it or not, we start discussing a topic anyway. And I've been really happy that in the last year, in the lockdown, we've been able to come together like that. And I intend to keep organizing it, if not every week, at least twice a month. So I just posted on the chat box. There is a link to my page. This is the part where I normally publish about every next one. And you can also see the recordings of the previous ones. So if you're interested in any of these topics, you can rewatch them. Any questions? Anything else you think I need to say?
thank you, Radalina.
What's the name of the group?
Great.
Well, my website is called The Sixth Seat, but there isn't really a name of the group because we're not a fixed group. There are several people that are with us every time, and James has been one of them, more or less every time. But every time we have new people joining us, and it's very open invitation kind of style. And I didn't want to make it an official club or something like this, but just to every now and then to create a meeting, an improvised meeting, where I normally post about a week in advance on Facebook groups, and just different people join us every time.
Okay. Katrina, you also had an announcement, yes?
Yes, I have an announcement. I was going to make it an announcement to a group that I founded. It's called the Uranian Times Think Tank. I have an Instagram page and a Facebook group that I already founded a couple of months ago, but I just got the ESAR grant for.
Oh, great. Congratulations.
Yeah, I just got it. They sent it out on the eclipse. So ESAR is International Society of Astrological Research, and it's to help co-found what is a think tank about transformational astrology, but in kind of reaching across the aisle to include intergenerational and round table thinking, where we not only share the mic, but pass the mic. So participants are collaborating to have private and public salons. Right now we're hosting on Friday mornings at 10 a.m. so we can include those in Europe. To come up with strategies and solutions for this unusual Uranian times that we're in.
Well, unusual times? What makes you think that these are unusual times? Seems like the unusual is now usual.
Usual, yeah. I mean, that's what I decided to try it as a Uranian Times think tank, because I thought if technology groups can have think tanks and labs, certainly astrologers, thinkers, and creatives need them and need that collaborative support. Yeah, I would say certainly highly electrical decades we've been drifting through, and this conversation is evidence of that.
Does anybody else have any announcements they would care to make? Okay. I guess, Spencer, do you think we're ready to start here?
Well, we've got 27 people. There'll be more. And because we had a huge group of people respond to this topic. So I think we should probably go ahead and start, because now we're at 28 instead of 27. And so, yeah, let's get the ball rolling here.
Okay, here we go. All right, let me get this. Oops, go back here, get to the first slide. We'll start that. I will go back over here. Here we go. Okay, so, whoops, stop. And here we go. Oh, gotta share my screen. Here we go. Okay. Okay, everybody see this okay? Okay, so if you aren't, would you please mute yourselves to minimize our feedback and confusion? Okay, so first off, a disclaimer. Spencer gets credit for the topic. Sorry, Spencer, but this was your idea. So planets in containment, who's in the middle? And it's what, June 13th? Good news is Friday the 13th came on a Sunday this month, so we're okay. Here we go. Our agenda. Okay, so we're gonna go through a little astrological calendar, taking us from tomorrow through July 11th, which is our next meeting. Spencer's going to go over the couple of eclipses we've had. We're going to talk a little bit about what is meant by planetary containment. We talk a lot about stelliums because they're the classic example of a containment. We've got several chart examples that we can try to get through, and then we got some more notes, some wrap-up Q&A, and a couple of references for you. Anybody got any questions before we get started? You'll have to unmute yourself if you do. All right. So there's actually quite a bit coming up. I was surprised between now and our next meeting. Big thing, and I didn't have it on here. Tomorrow is the second of 3 Saturn-Uranus squares. This is a third quarter square. Saturn in Aquarius, Uranus in Taurus. And the last one is, their third will be in December. So this is a very long process. The first one was earlier this year. So yeah, it's a long process. So if you're enjoying the current Saturn-Uranus situation, then I think you probably will enjoy the rest of the year. June 20th, we have Jupiter stationing retrograde at 2 Pisces, and we have the summer solstice. On the 22nd, Mercury will station direct, 16 Gemini. Raise your hand if that affects your chart. Thank you. Let's see. On June 23rd, the moon is going to go out of bounds south. June 24th, we have a full moon in Capricorn. June 25th, Neptune stations retrograde, at which point we will have 4 planets retrograde. Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto. And so from that point on, we're going to have several months with 4 or more planets retrograde. On the 26th, Venus will enter Leo and the moon will return inbound. On July 1st, Mars opposes Saturn. Could be interesting when the 2 malefics face off like that. July 3rd, Mars first quarter square to Uranus. That will certainly add to the Saturn-Uranus energies. Then on the 7th, the moon goes out of bounds north. July 9th, we have a new moon, 18 Cancer. July 10th, the moon returns inbounds. And then on July 11th, which is our next meetup, Mercury enters Leo. Anybody got questions? Ooh, we got somebody else in our, hey, here we go. So anybody, this slideshow, I will make it into a PDF file. I will upload it to our Facebook page where, you know, you can download it. Or if you want, you can send me an email and I will send it to you. There we go. Ah. Oops. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Spencer, yeah, here's our lunar eclipse. I'll let you take it from here.
Okay. Let me adjust so I get the full screen here. This should be your view. No, let's try this one. No. There we go. Okay. Now, the first thing I want to talk about before we get into the eclipse stories that I'm going to relate to and ask if other people have an eclipse story is what to do when some of your friends say, and you've told them that an eclipse is coming up, you know, like eclipse is coming up, this is a big deal. Or sometimes even other astrologers who don't really think there's a power to eclipses. The point of the story, I think, here is to understand how an eclipse works in your chart. And the first thing I have to say is, if you think an eclipse is going to really hit you, the first thing to kind of give you a key to if it's going to hit you is what hard aspects does the eclipse make? Now, if the eclipse doesn't make a hard aspect, and by a hard aspect, these are Ptolemaic hard aspects, we're talking about whether you have a conjunction where the eclipse conjuncts a planet that you have, where it makes a definite square to the planets involved with the eclipse, or if you have a situation where the eclipse opposes a planet that you have in the eclipse. These are the things to really look for, because it's been my experience that these are the keys. I found that eclipses that don't really make hard aspects to my planets, my chart, that there is a kind of an ease to going through this eclipse. It's not really so bad. Sometimes you might take a good hard look at the house it falls into, because that might represent a larger area of influence that the eclipse may have. And I think this is something to consider as we approach eclipses. Now, what we're going to set up, and now I can't see, all I can see is the screen, is I'm going to relate what my reactions to the solar eclipse were, and then talk about one full moon that we had. Now, first of all, let's take a look at the lunar eclipse of that we had recently on 26, I think it was, or 20, yeah, the 26th.
Yeah, May 26th.
All right, so we now have that up, and in this eclipse, the eclipse is within 2 degrees of my Uranus, and my Uranus is on 7 degrees of Gemini, and it's being opposed. Now, remember I said they have to have a hard aspect. So the hard aspect of here is that the eclipsed moon makes a hard aspect to my natal chart. So what my experience was on this particular eclipse is that you would expect that it would represent aspects of my own desire to get things done, and the consequence of looking at how this would happen, because that's Uranus basically. And what I had was interesting, because now this is a situation I'm going to talk about both of these eclipses, not all of them, but both of them, since the solar eclipse as well, is that I have 2 things that were going on. One is I'm working on a children's book called Lucky the Fox. And I was going through illustrations, and I was very, very frustrated, more frustrated than normal, over the fact that none of the Australians suddenly, at first, when I first got them, I thought, oh, these are great. But then suddenly during the eclipse, I realized these aren't right. And I had to get into a very involved conversation with the illustrator as to what I really wanted and what they really thought that they could do. So this was one aspect to put friction in a situation, because I was very intense. I didn't like the tail. I didn't like the, I'm not going to go through what I went with it, but that was one of the situations. The other situation was I felt very, very anxious, not just about the book I was trying to write, but I was very anxious about the kind of general floating anxiety, I think that Freud calls it, where just suddenly you're not feeling comfortable in your skin. And for some reason, you feel like you're really feeling a hard aspect with great intensity. And that was my experience really with this eclipse. Now, I also want to point out that this eclipse, to me, really about 5 hours after the eclipse, I was okay. But the 3 or 4 days before the eclipse, I went through all of this trauma of the floating anxiety, and then the kind of, I wouldn't say heated, but very intense discussion of what I wanted to do with my book. So that, and so what I say is, if you might feel an eclipse coming, and then it gives relief. Some people feel more of the effect after the eclipse. And that's certainly another way that sometimes I would feel them. But the most recent 2 eclipse, I felt that way. Now, there was a much more difficult exchange when we got to the solar eclipse. And let's take a peek at that. Can we look at, okay.
So this is,
yeah, this is the most recent eclipse. And this was, for me, now you're going to see why I have come up with this idea about hard aspects, that let's take a look at the eclipse. Now, the immediate anxiety that I had about this eclipse, is, even long before it happened, was that it's exactly by degree on my Mars. So I was looking at something and I said, my God, this is going to be on my Mars. What is going to happen with me? And the whole situation here is that I once again felt a very big buildup, but also I became much more verbally aggressive and got into a few, I would actually classify them as altercations, where I was working on relationships that some slag, I would say, was developing in the relationship. And there was inner tension in the relationship, and it blew up. And the little things that were causing trouble were then verbally expressed with high emotion. Now, one thing I say is not good to have high emotion with friends, but on the other hand, sometimes in friendships, you have to really release a lot of energy to get a clarity to how you want the relationship to go forward. This is, I call slag, is that aspect which is calling certain aspects of the relationship are now causing definite feelings of something is going on here that I have to talk about. And I had things to talk about with a couple of people who are my friends, very dear friends, in fact. And yet I didn't feel that there was an amount of reciprocation in terms of the give and take and the friendship. And I felt that one friend was completely, without consideration of my feelings, and I had gone along with this for some time. And so there was a big blow up over my feelings and their responses. And the other eclipse was another blow up thing that occurred, all within 4 days of the eclipse. Now, after the eclipse, once again, on this one, about 3 or 4 hours after the eclipse, the exactness of the eclipse, I started to feel relief. So these are my 2 concepts, and what I'd like to do now, and I don't know how I can look at this. How do I look at the screen now? So if any of you want to share a concept or a theory that you have about eclipses, or an experience that you had, with the eclipses that came up. We would like to share it. Now, what I'm trying to figure out what to do now is how do I get back to where I'm not dealing with Jim's screen? What do I do here? Oh, here. Let me see what I get here. I don't see everyone like I think I should to. Can you see everybody, Jim?
I can see most everybody. Hang on. Okay. Let's see, make this bigger.
This one's.
Does anybody have an eclipse story that they'd care to share? Unmute yourself and jump in.
Well, I will. I know 3 teens that sunk into severe depressions. One of them, the eclipse was sitting on her natal sun, opposite, it was a birthday, opposite her Pluto natally, attempted suicide. So all 3 of these teens right now are in the hospital. They all within a few days of each other, all. I was driving up from California. I got home, collapsed. Just, I'm feeling fabulous. Right in the middle of the eclipse thing, I collapsed on the floor for 3 hours. Right? Couldn't move. I'm moving now, but feeling pretty lousy. But it really, it was conjunct, Mars is conjunct my sun with this. The eclipse isn't so, it's in my 2nd house. But I know a lot of people that had very intense experiences. This was a very intense one, I think. I don't know if I'm the only one. I thought it was super intense.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Cindy?
Yeah.
I had a lot of people also, just this, I'm kind of backing up to the full moon before these eclipses started in Scorpio. And I had several people in that eclipse, and in that full moon, kind of have experiences like yours. It was very intense. Did you have anything that happened during the full moon in Scorpio, which is supposed to be the most super of the moons? The moon was closest to the
Was it
Earth.
the June 5th one? The June 5th?
No, the May 26th.
The May 26th.
Lunar one.
Oh, the lunar one. Well, yeah, you know what I was doing. I mean, it was emotionally intense and it was kind of draining. My parents have both passed away and we were making glass, using their ashes to make some glass pieces, combining their ashes and glass pieces. And it was emotionally very intense and draining. And my sister and I were just physically exhausted and drained beyond what it should have been at the end of it. And my mom was a Scorpio.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
So a quick plug here on eclipses. If you really want to know more about eclipses, probably one of the best books is going to be Bernadette Brady's book, Predictive Astrology, The Eagle and the Lark.
Mm-hmm.
In it, she goes through all of the eclipses by family, gives you the dates of the eclipses, and a synopsis of a general theme for each of the eclipses, solar only. But this is what she wrote about the one that we just had on June 10th. Says it's a very unusual Sero series involving sudden flashes of ideas that seem to have a psychic or unconscious flavor to them. Hunches, visions, prophetic dreams are the essence of this family of eclipses. A truly creative series which should leave the individual enriched. The ideas or hunches which come from this eclipse can be acted upon. Wow. Sounds very positive, but then again, it also depends on, in part, how the eclipse affects your chart.
That makes sense. I agree. However, I do, just to play the devil's advocate, as I typically do, I would argue that we constantly receive ideas and hunches every day. So I would find it interesting for that author or Bernadette to clarify the difference. You know what I mean?
I think the difference may be that those that seem to be connected with the eclipse are ones that tend to be more positive or ones that you can act on. Where other hunches that we get during the day, we may or may not feel the urge to act on so much. The urges should be stronger, but yeah, you know, we get them every day, but we don't always act on them.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Something I want to point out on this chart, you'll notice the two blue arrows. For me, astrology is, I have to be able to visualize what's going on in order to really make sense of things. And so I want to make sure, you know, you understand when you look at a chart, it's like looking at a photograph of a family picture, okay? But you have to realize that right before the picture, people were moving, and right after the picture, they're moving again. The question is, what direction are they going? And with any chart, the outer wheel is rotating clockwise. So the whole chart is rotating clockwise. But the planets on the inside are actually moving in a counterclockwise direction. The only reason that sun rises in the east and sets in the, or planets rise in the east and set in the west, is because the Earth's rotation, and it rotates faster than they move, basically. So to always keep that in, I think you should always try to keep that in mind when you're looking at a chart in terms of what's going on directionally. Oops. Okay.
Hey, Jim, I can chime in with one quickie. You know, oftentimes the eclipses eclipse a king, queen, or leader. And I was watching for it in the news. Did anybody also see that Justin Trudeau, the leader of Canada, someone had a moment of inspiration and slapped him in the face at a public speaking engagement.
Yeah.
So that can happen. I don't know his chart, but I just thought I'd say, I was looking for it. Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, the other thing is that Katrina, since you mentioned that, is that I've noticed that this solar eclipse at 19 Gemini was particularly close to a former president's chart. So it was like 3 days. It was like 4 days before his birthday. I think 3 days after the former vice president's birthday. And so it'll be interesting to see how things develop there. I won't make any more comments about them.
Exactly. I should add, me and the former president, we share a birthday, separated by decades, but nevertheless, I just think it's interesting that you mentioned that the solar eclipse, I think it was on June 10th, it was at 19 degrees, and that's about 4 degrees away from my sun.
Mm-hmm.
And this morning, not that day, not on June 10th, but on today, this morning, I haven't been asleep since yesterday, by the way. I've had this amazing amount of energy, and it's my birthday tomorrow, and I don't know, maybe the eclipse has an impact, but this morning I just woke up with such an amazingly inspirational ideas, and I was talking about how I need to act on them, and I just thought, I don't know, it just matches the theme you shared. So
can I ask a question here? What house was that in, this eclipse, in terms of being close to your natal sun?
Oh, okay. The solar eclipse that took place on June 10th is in my 12th house.
Your 12th house?
Mm-hmm. My sun is in the 12th. Yep.
Were there any memories or things like that of insight that came to you during that time?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's every day. I have a moon in Pisces, Mercury in the 12th. So yeah, I'm very Neptunian. I'm always inspired. But specifically, I felt two very strange feelings. You know, I had two impressions that were not tangible, but yet I could comprehend the information that I received from that feeling, I guess. So yeah.
Sounds like Bernadette was right.
Yeah, it actually does now. Well, I'm not going to comment anymore, but thank you for letting me share that.
Yeah, that's the thing with eclipses, and with any major aspect, is that sometimes it may bring things that happen before and sometimes after. Keep in mind that the outer planets move quite slowly, so they're in aspect for a long time. Even if you use a fairly narrow aspect orb they're going to be in aspect for quite a while. Okay.
Can I share my experience really quickly? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Usually I'm new to this group. Hi, everyone. My name's Ray. I just joined. Yeah,
Welcome.
usually on, thank you. Usually on eclipses, some I don't feel anything, but usually I do feel like I will receive memories, downloads from previous incarnations, and the energy from that incarnation will leave my body, like the stored whatever trauma or whatever emotion I was feeling at that certain point will come through, and I'll feel it leave my body. So that's actually happened to me on numerous occasions where I've just had to like take a day or two and just lie in bed and let the whole thing roll through like a flu. So it's pretty interesting. I don't know if anyone else has had that experience. So
it is interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
But
Let
yeah,
me say one more thing about this before we go away. By talking about my personal eclipse, I think I didn't really emphasize that this kind of stuff can happen for a certain length of time. The first length that I work with is just a month because I go from new moon to new moon. Now, Jim, remember when we learned about the bending?
yes.
Some people will say that the eclipse, something happens on the degree of the eclipse until the next eclipse happens is very important. And I haven't found the bending to be so important, but I have found at times that the degree of the eclipse for a month seems very tender and very important.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about that.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing to keep in mind too, is that every eclipse is going to create what could be considered a sensitive point in your chart. So that other aspects to that point, even though you may, can reactivate the essence of the eclipse, at least for a period of time. And then we can start talking about prenatal eclipses and things of that nature as well, but that's a whole nother session. Matthew, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say a good example of that I saw was Prince Philip, who died in April. His birthday was June 10th. And it just showed that's why maybe looking ahead at where eclipses land is important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, good point. I didn't even realize that.
I'd like to do a quick jump in here. I don't know how to raise my hand. I don't know where that puppy is. Anyways, when it comes to focusing on transits, a lot of folks, when it comes to reading the beginner books, keep thinking luck is associated with Jupiter. Well, so is Uranus. And you compare the transits, their cycles, Uranus orbit is 6 times longer than Jupiter's. So if you're doing electional astrology, like say for gambling or start a business or get married, you might want to pay more attention to Uranus more so than Jupiter, because you have 6 times during a transit to go up to the plate to try to get something accomplished with Uranus.
Yes, good point, Andrew. Yeah. We tend to think of the inner visible planets as being the primary rulers and really making things happen, but we can't overlook the 3 outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Their effects can be more dramatic and longer lasting, and even stronger in many cases. Yeah. Katrina, you raised your hand.
Actually, Rita raised her hand first physically.
Oh, did Rita?
I'm going to pass it to Rita first.
I don't know where I am on your chart, on your screen.
Oh, I don't either, but go for it, Rita.
You didn't find me? Okay. So I'm following these dates, and but in between these 2 dates, a lot of unusual, crazy, new things happened. And because I'm a Virgo, was thinking it was Mercury in retrograde. But I'm wondering if it's between these 2 dates. I mean, we're talking, they billed me wrong for my rent. Everything that was communications was off. So I thought it was Mercury in retrograde. And then I went to bed like totally exasperated with the money. And then the next day I got an offer to put an ad in a very exclusive part of Studio City. So it was just all these, and actually then I did sign on June 10th, which was that during that solar eclipse. So I don't know, Jim, you know a little bit more, but I was talking about, you may want to add that, but it just seems that it fell between these lunar and solar eclipse. By the way, I was the only one out in my neighborhood trying to see that lunar eclipse out there at 3 in the morning.
Yeah, I went out and looked for it too, and it was all overcast here, so I couldn't see it.
Yes, I had to go to the Griffith Observatory and they had it virtually, but.
Yeah,
So
it always, the nice thing now is you can usually find them online where you can watch them.
So do you think about that between those two dates for me, Jim?
Well, yeah, that's something to keep in mind, is that eclipses always occur in at least a pair, about 2 weeks apart. It may start with a new moon and then you have a full moon, or you may have a full moon and then a new moon, as we just had. And so that time in between is always going to be significant. Particularly when you think in terms of like the lunar phases, where you're going from a full moon back to a new moon, because you're going from a harvest time into time for preparation to get ready for a new beginning, which then is the new moon solar eclipse. So I think prior to the next series of eclipses, which happen at the end of the year, we will probably do a session on eclipses and go into it in more detail. How does that sound, Spencer?
It sounds good. I think it's good. I'd like to say to the lady who brought up the midpoint, there are midpoints between eclipses that might be something you want to look at as well. If it happened exactly between the two, all that Jim said is true about the plethora of points that might be interesting, but also it sounds like yours hit on the midpoint between the eclipses. Was it exactly in between?
Let's see, what happened with Rita was, see, Rita is kind of like my twin sister from another mother and 1,000 miles away. So Jupiter is opposing our Mercury, and the solar eclipse was on our Uranus. And let's see, the lunar eclipse, and the lunar eclipse was making a square to our Sun Mercury midpoints. So yeah, there's stuff going on in between. Okay, we need to get moving here because time is passing us by.
Jim, I just wanted to chime in real quick with one about, the length of a solar eclipse, and Cornelia could check me on my facts, but I have been tracking the 2017 US eclipse, which has been playing out for 4 years, over 4 years and over 4 minutes, which I really think harmonizes with this recent eclipse too.
Yeah, there are very varying opinions in terms of how long the eclipses last. You can think of them like a solar return. They last for about a year. The energy starts to shift prior to the event. But yeah, at a minimum, I would consider that a solar eclipse is going to last until the next solar eclipse. But that energy doesn't necessarily go away. That point still remains sensitive. And so if you have an eclipse that has a significant effect on you or resonates with your chart, anytime there's another aspect to that point can re-energize that for quite a while.
Does anybody know of any book titles that refer to when transits hit an eclipse point?
Transits to eclipses. There are a lot of books about eclipses, and that would be the place to start. I would have to go through some of mine to see if any of them really go into much detail about transits to eclipse points.
I was just recommended Predictive Astrology by, I don't remember the author, but
Bernadette Brady.
Yeah, it was related to a lot of that's what we're talking about. I don't know if it's specifically about eclipses, but I recently, like within the last week, was recommended that book. So
yeah, she goes into great detail about the eclipses, and I think she does talk to some extent about, she may talk about transits. I haven't really looked at it in a long time other than to check the eclipses as they're happening.
I assume, I assume that would be a good one.
Yeah.
I know you want to move on, but that whole thing, I was in the Huntington Gardens and there was a statue of Mercury. So I was kind of like, I don't know if you talk to or send energy to it, but I was talking to the Mercury. planet.
Well, good. You know, if anything you do to put positive energy out there is going to come back to you in a positive way. Okay,
I have a
so let's talk
question,
about
James.
planetary containment and what exactly are we talking about? When you read astrology books, basically they will tell you about, well, here's a conjunction between the sun and Mercury, Uranus and Pluto, whatever that, you know, they'll go into a lot of talk about the conjunctions. And they'll talk about, you know, squares and trines. But what happens when you've got three planets that are basically, you know, say, let's say close together, like a stellium? They don't really talk about stelliums. And they don't really go into anything in terms of looking at the sequence of the planets in a chart where you can look at the chart in whole. So in basically planetary containment, and I'll show you the book. There's a book, Planets in Containment, by John Sandbeck and Ron Ballard, which is really the only book that goes into it in any great detail. And the unfortunate thing is it's out of print and used copies are running $200+ bucks. So, but what it
in about 50 years old.
Yeah, about that. The sequence, it's a matter of looking at planets in sequence. And that's why I wanted to point out the direction of the planets, because you're going, when you look at things in sequence, you want to go in zodiacal order. So it's always, you know, if you want to, you start with Aries and you go through them in order through Pisces. So it's always look at the first planet, the second. So you're reading it in counterclockwise. You're reading your planets counterclockwise, which is zodiacal.
Jim, you didn't put the third planet is what?
Oh yeah, I was going to look that up and I forgot to get that done. So hang on.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt to use the phrase regardless of arc. You don't have to be anywhere near each other. Strictly sequence, regardless of arc.
Yes, they don't. And that's the interesting thing about containment, as they talked about it, is that it's not about orbs at all. Okay, the planet in front will show how the planet. Okay, whoopsie, come back here. At any rate, so the first planet is considered the foundation. The second planet is looked at as being the fulcrum or balance point, and it doesn't have to be on a midpoint, though if it is on a midpoint, that makes it even stronger. And the third point then kind of shows the where everything is going.
The result?
Pardon?
The result?
Yeah. I just had it. And then I lost it.
While you're looking, may I say that I observed that in the Hori charts a lot, where let's say the ruler of the quadrant is just leaving the previous planet that it conjunct, and then going to the next planet. So that gives me an indication, you know, maybe a suggestion. Let's say it just left Venus and it's going to Mars. So, you know, that kind of a feeling.
Yeah, and you can look at them in a number of ways. One, the third planet in the sequence is basically becomes a destination. So if the first planet shows where the middle planet pushes off from or leaves from, a point of departure, then the third planet, the planet on the other side, shows the destination. And if you think of it this way, okay, they're moving. Okay, but if you take any one planet in your chart and you freeze the other planets, and then you look at the planet that was before it in zodiacal order, that's the last planet it touched. That's where it came from. And then you look at the planet that's next in zodiacal order, that shows you where it's going. So you can think of them in terms of past, present, future. You can think of it as foundation, home base, destination. and the travel in between. It's a matter of trying to find, blending the 3 points together to get a sense of it. So the classic example, and I will fill in that missing part about the third planet there, is the stellium, which is really a concentrated containment. So here we go. Spencer, here you go.
Okay. First of all, we're kind of running really quickly on time, and this is really going to get complex. So what I'd like to do is just kind of read these points which I've written out, and then not to interrupt me doing this, because we're going to then move to a whole series of very interesting charts that have been sent into us by people who have been involved with our meetup group. So let's go first of all to a definition of what is a stellium. And a stellium really is 3 or 4 planets or more, each within 7 degrees of each other. So you have one, and then there would be separation between the first and the second. It would be somewhere around 7 degrees. And then from the middle to the one at the end is also 7 degrees. And I would also add that sometimes it might be necessary to extend the 7 degrees a little bit if you have a planet that's very strong, like Saturn or something. Only planets count. Do not consider non-physical points such as nodes and angles. Okay, let's. What are the what are the planets and the signs or signs involved? They're dignitaries. And dignified, exalted, fall, debilitated. Now, so you've identified the planets as they're within 7 degrees. Now you want to know who are the planets and what are the signs that they're involved in. Then you want to look at the house of the planet. And so what are the houses involved in, and how does that work? And in this situation, you have planets where planets may go over the point of a house separate house cusp. And so you want to take a close look at that. Do we have a next one? Did I talk about that? Yes. Now, what is the ruling planet of the stellium if the stellium is spreads, or if the stellium spreads over 2 signs? So first of all, you have a stellium and everybody's in Aries, and that's one place. And you look at, now it's in Aries, and what rules the cusp? One planet in one house or one sign, whereas the other 2 are together. For example, this is called a bi-sign or a bi-house. For example, Mercury late in Virgo and Neptune and Sun in Libra within 7 points of each other, and also within 7 points of Virgo. This really creates a much different blend to what's going on, because Mercury here is dignified in Virgo and would rule one part of the stellium, where Venus, wherever Venus is, would rule the Neptune and the Sun. So this is a very kind of interesting look at the kind of the spice or the nuance that you have to look at. What houses do the planets in the stellium rule? Now, let's say you have Jupiter in the 7th house, Jupiter in Libra in the 7th house, and then Jupiter has somehow gotten itself in it rules Sag, which is somewhere off. So if Mars was in the 9th house, still ruled by Venus, it would then control that house while being ruled by Venus. I hope that's clear. But the point of it is that if you have Libra as one house where you have the Jupiter, then the Jupiter sign, wherever Sag is, will manifest itself, but it's going to also be manifesting as being ruled by Jupiter, because the Jupiter being ruled by Venus, therefore rules the Sag. Let's go to the next point. Does the chart ruler of the nativity, the planet ruling the rising sign, have any bearing on the stellium? On a Leo ascendant, 3 planets in Scorpio, Sun in Pisces in the 8th house. So the situation here of the ascendant dealing with 3 planets in Scorpio, the ruler of the chart with the Leo on the ascendant would have a situation where you're involved also with Scorpio in the situation. Okay, the next question is a sign or house with no planets yet ruled by a planet in the stellium. This is something that's very interesting because if you have a stellium in one of the planets, we go back to Venus again, and Venus is ruling Taurus, and Taurus house has no planets in it, then the concept of what would Venus do with the Taurus sign, because they're very different planets, they're both ruled by the Venus, how would that manifest itself? And I think it would also manifest in the potential stubbornness, the potential need for concrete results, the aspect of sensuality, all of these aspects I think could come from that kind of a thing. And let's see, aspects made to planets in the stellium. Now, this is another interesting problem. If you have a stellium in Libra and you have a Mars out floating around there and makes a ruler of the planet in the stellium, this really, to me, really activates the stellium much more, because a square from Mars or opposition or any hard aspect would make a very interesting problem in terms of what is all that Mars energy going on into a stellium in Libra. That make the people less diplomatic, less involved in kinds of beauty that they have. This is something to consider. What is the next? No, we've got that one. Is there a pair of sands close? Oh, that's interesting too. What if you have two planets together within 2 degrees and then the other one is 7 degrees away? And this is something also to take into consideration, because obviously the two planets together are going to have some kind of combined energy that, while they make an effect on the planet 7 degrees away, more than it would if it was closer. And this is something also to take into consideration. And sometimes, you know, like I keep saying, if it's Saturn or some planet that has a wider, usually recommended orb, then I would take that into effect. Now, here's one that I have dealt with, and this is if the stellium is in an intercepted sign. Now, a lot of people who go full house or these other house, equal house, they don't really get into this, because you have to go with Koch or Placidus to have these kinds of configurations in your chart. But I have found that there is a muted effect, even though it's a very strong stellium. There's a muted effect if it's like, let's take Aries, and Aries on one side is Pisces, on the other side has Taurus. This is a group of Libra people that, well, on the one hand, is still very powerful in the 10th house, having to do with career points, manifesting points of people being familiar with your stuff, areas where your success may be located. I find it is kind of muted. And I'd be very willing, when we open this up to discussion, if anyone also has a planet or is given a reading to a group who have a stellium in an intercepted sign, that would be the other. The other is an interesting situation. If you have the planet in the middle of the stellium is different from the strengths. Let's say we have Mars, Venus, and Saturn in Capricorn. Well, first of all, Saturn is going to basically control that, because the stellium is, of course, in Capricorn. But the other thing, Saturn basically is going to have a certain Saturnian effect, both on the Mars and the Venus, changing kind of the whole impact of the influence of the stellium. So that's a list of kind of things to consider when you're looking at a stellium, and how to consider the various aspects that it has in terms of your natal chart and its position in natal chart, and the houses and the signs. So I hope that is something that we can now use. We're going to shift now into, we're going to go into the dignified aspects. Then we're going to go to the planet, the charts. Isn't that right, Jim? Something like that?
Yeah, so I thought I'd throw this in here because not everybody may have this or be necessarily aware of it. But when we're talking about rulerships and whether a planet's exalted or in detriment or fall, basically we're talking about the rules by Ptolemy. Yeah, like almost 10 years ago.
We're getting too far off the topic. The original topic, according to the meetup description, was about
We're fine.
planets in containment. Planets in
Yes, yes,
containment, not stelliums and not falls,
yes.
and not rulerships
Okay.
or exaltations.
All right, I hear you. But in order to properly evaluate the planets, whether they're a stellium is a containment. Okay, and it's used. We're
Plants
using
in
that as an
containment
example.
are plants in containment. You're doing a bait and switch, bringing in these other terms with other definitions.
Okay,
Stick
it's
to the
not a bait and
topic.
switch.
Yes, you are.
Not a bait and switch.
If I
Just
can offer, I could share that any stellium is also by default gonna be considered a planet, you know, a group of planets in containment. So I think that's important to note. But
the
I do
point
agree
is,
with
It is
Andrew.
limited with talking about a 7-degree arc. Plants and containments are not limited to
With us.
arcs.
okay, with us. Hang in there.
Okay, good. Yeah. I was gonna say the same, suggest the same. I think that it's important to speak on the stellium,
I mean,
you know, in relation to the planets. in
There are
containment,
plenty
because
of
they're-
books on stelliums. There's only one book about plants on containment. Let's stick on the rare topic.
Yeah,
getting-
I have a feeling they're gonna get to it.
I
If I'll be
don't.
patient.
Yeah,
This is
if you're
bait
having
and
a
switch.
problem, you don't have to stay. I'm sorry. I understand what you're saying, but we're getting there. Because there's only the one book on.
Exactly.
Mercury is retrograde.
Who said that? That's funny. Well, it looks like we lost James. And there's a
Where's
high-pitched
Jim?
beeping
Where's Jim?
sound.
Andrew, I'd like to say this in all humility and sincerity, that if you're upset with how we're handling this particular topic, you're certainly free to dismiss yourself from the group.
Okay, hang on.
Someone
Okay,
already
hang on.
chose to
I
knock
had
me off.
I got knocked out.
Me too.
I had an internet connection issue here, so this may have affected everybody. I'm not sure. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that people understand, have a reference for the rulerships and the power of the planets in that sense. Can you see are you seeing my screen or not?
No.
What are folks seeing? No, okay. Hang on, let me go back to, let me do this. Here we go. Zoom meeting, here we go. Let's go back to screen sharing. I'm gonna turn off my video. Maybe that'll help.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
just seeing your headshot, Jim.
Okay. Okay, share. There we go. Okay, I'm back. Hopefully you can, okay. So for those of you who aren't familiar with today's rulerships,
Hello?
Spencer
Mercury's
just,
still retrograde.
Yeah, his Wi-Fi is unstable.
and the moon just went
Well,
into Leo, and Mars is in Leo.
I was
to
wondering,
speak
I
on
was like,
what
something
someone
literally
said
just
in the-
happened 5 minutes ago.
To speak to what someone said in the chat, they said, but Spencer asked that folks hold their comments. He did, but he also then opened the floor to comments. You might have missed that. Katrina or whoever it was that made that comment. And
It's
then
Katarina.
oh,
Katarina.
sorry, I didn't look at the name. So sorry, Katarina. But then also moving on from that, I just wanted to ask you, Spencer. So yes, it's apparent that all stelliums, according to your the description you offered, they're all going to be considered containments. But I am curious at some point, whenever you get to it, for you to describe the difference between the containment as a stellium versus a planets in containment that are not within the orb range to be a stellium configuration. Mercury retrograde, he's on the phone. He's like...
Spencer, you've been made the, oh, Spencer's on the
He's
line.
on the phone. This is
Spencer's
really,
been made the show host. The show must go on.
And I imagine he's on the phone with James Schultz, so.
James is back, I think.
Well, I guess who knows what to do right now. Radalina, have you had any experiences with the solar or lunar eclipse?
The honest is, before I tell you about this, I haven't got an interesting story about this, so I didn't share. But I'm new to the topic of containment. This is very interesting. I wanted to learn more about this. And as far as I understood, yes,
James is back.
James is back.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, the show's back on. Yay!
Here we go. All right, we go. Oops, wait a minute. Get back to. Oh, okay, dokie. Here we go. All right, we're going to move along quickly here. There's that. Next up, here we go. Hang on, here we go. Here we go. All right, here's a chart. So we had some volunteers. All right, so from the perspective of containment, what we're talking about is going to be, let's look at Mars, Uranus, and Neptune. You see them up here at the top?
You're not sharing your screen, James.
Are you seeing this?
No, you're not screen.
No, not yet.
Yeah, please share.
You're not seeing my screen. Okay, hang on. Maybe I didn't do something. Okay, let's share. Hang on. Hang on. Let's see.
Does anyone else have anything to talk about how the concept of stelliums was presented in terms of the things to work on 3 planets in a stellium? We can kick this off by now if you want to talk about it, or if you have any concepts you want to talk about eclipses, or if you just have a nuisance, in essence, something you'd like to talk about. Let's
I
kick
have
it in.
one.
I have a busy 5-planet stellium of crazy containment if anybody wants it.
Well,
Yes, why don't you share it? Because I may have another one too. We can compare.
Oh, yeah.
Does anybody, are you seeing my screen?
Oh, no, we don't see
No, James, not yet.
That's weird. Okay, because I'm doing screen share and it's not working.
Radalina, did you ask for my stellium?
Yes, if everyone else is all right with that.
So I have a Mercury, Uranus in Libra, 25-28, followed by a Mars, Venus, Sun in Scorpio at 3, 8, and 9.
Okay. Now, how would you look at that? So how do you look at that conglomeration that you've got there?
How would I?
Yeah.
A lot of planets answer to Mars.
But your eclipse, I mean, your stellium also goes over 2 different signs. So there'd be a very strong mix, I would think, with the Scorpion being probably stronger than the Libra. How do you think about that?
I think about a busy, powerful stellium with
Where's
those
Pluto?
7,
Where's Pluto in your chart?
7 Libra.
What
second and third.
Where is the, well, I'm trying to get, so you got part of it's in Libra, so that could be involved with the Venus, but you also have to deal with the Venus with Pluto and Mars for the Scorpio part. So I think there'd be something I'd like to talk about is what is the relationship to Venus, which is dignified in Libra, as opposed to the planets in Scorpio, which are ruled by Pluto and Mars. What effect does that have on the Libra planets, do you think? Because we'd have to all agree that Scorpio seems to be a very dominant sign and planet.
It's like Bruce Lee. It's like Bruce Lee in a feminine form. He also has Mars, Venus, and Scorpio, and he's also an artist, was dancer, martial artist, ninja, performer with a lot of Plutonian scorpionic power.
I wonder, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I wonder if Raven is still with us. No, I think she disappeared. Raven is a lady who was just with us, and she has almost exactly the same chart as Bruce Lee. We were just doing a chart yesterday. They were born on the same day, the same year, and only slightly different time. The ascendants are different, but that's a very, very interesting example.
Oh, is she here?
I think she disappeared. She was here just a moment ago. Raven Collins. Well, it's a pity she's gone now.
Fantastic coincidence.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So I have a
Try.
question.
Is anybody seeing my chart, my screen?
No, not at all.
No, Spencer Grendall is now host.
I've now started leading some type of discussion that we can have without the guidance of the visible chart. So does anyone else have something to talk about that is either involved with the eclipse cycle we've talked about, or with the concept of containment with stelliums? And the other concept is what Andrew had, which is a different concept of containment. And it's one that is very rare. Yes,
Spencer. Spencer, I have to go soon, and Jim had asked me to submit my chart, which has a containment, has a stellium, all the pieces that you're wanting.
Oh, good. Where I want to know if I know your chart too. Where is because I have this thing. I have another computer here that I can bring up the stuff that we have here. Go ahead and give the chart definition.
Okay, so the ascendant is at 13 degrees Cancer. The moon is in the 12th house at 1 degree Cancer. It's the midpoint, as well as the containment between the sun at 5 degrees Cancer, Mercury at 27 degrees Gemini. All of that is in the 12th. So we start with the Mercury in Gemini at 27, then the moon at 1, then the sun at 1 degree Cancer, 5 degree Cancer, sun, and then the ascendants at 13. Part of fortune's at 9, but if that matters. But.
Let me see. What is your rising sign again?
Cancer, 13 degrees Cancer.
Okay, I'll pull this up so we can all.
Are you willing to share your birth time so that we can actually put the chart up on our own computer and see it?
Now,
is it possible to share the screen from our sides?
Yeah, that's easier.
Oh,
God. You can let her share the screen.
Well, is it allowed? Does the host allow to share the screen from our side so we can show charts?
I don't think so.
Yes, you just go to the upper right. Sorry to interrupt. You go up to upper right, go to view and go to the speaker view, and then it'll pop up at the bottom with all the, it says participants, chat, share screen, record. That's how you can share your screen.
In this case, the meeting is set up in a way that the host needs to enable that.
Right.
Oh, it is?
I have to go in 5 minutes, guys. I thought we would get to this earlier than now. So what do you want? What do you want, Spencer?
Well, I'm going to have to say that we will not be able to view any of the charts that we have there, and it's also
Jim has the chart.
I know, but there's no way that I can put it up. I have the thing on a separate feed, so I can't really.
Okay.
The other thing that you can do is you can share the chart in a file in the chat, and you can download it that way.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yes, so you can tell us the details of the chart, and we can do it from our side and look at it.
Exactly.
So I'm not even sure what you're talking about, quite frankly.
You just go
what
to
they're saying,
go to the
Tony,
chat.
Is that you can send do you have your chart? Do you have access to your natal chart?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this is I'm doing Astro Gold for the first time, which, by the way, I would not recommend to anyone.
Me either. Me either. Been there, done that years ago.
It's the only way you can get the very highest level operating system in Mac. My computer went bye-bye. So, So I don't know how to
do
take
that.
my chart.
You could easily go to astro.com. You could do that right now if you wanted to, although you said you only have 5 minutes and you're done.
Yeah, I have to actually, I mean, I can, I've got it pulled up, but I don't know how to give it to you guys.
So Tony, just
so look, go to astro.com, just type in astro.com in your browser. It's very simple, and type in your birth data. It should only take you a couple minutes, and then you would just simply, open. You would right click the image of your chart after you input the data, and then you will open in a new tab and then copy that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but would it not be quicker if she just gives us the details of the chart? I can do it like in 2 seconds and send you the file of the chart.
You're right, Tony. Why don't you type in a chat a private message to Radalina your details, and that should work.
I'm trying to, send it to you, the file.
Yeah, you could send the file, or as Radalina said, you could just type your.
I realize I would just rather not give out publicly. I'm a public figure, so I'd rather not give out.
Okay.
Can you just do a screenshot of the chart portion and send that in the chat?
Yeah.
All right, hang on.
That would be easier.
Yeah, for some reason, the screen share is not working for me for some reason. I don't know if this, and then it keeps.
I just
kicking
copied
me out. Let
the
me try.
chart. I'm trying to copy it and then how to put it. It's just not showing up when I try to paste it.
Copy it and paste it in
Hang on,
Microsoft
let me
Word.
try one more time.
Paste it in, or what do you have? You're on Mac.
It's a Mac.
I would save it and then upload it.
Copy.
All right, I'm gonna try screen share one more time while she's doing that.
Did someone say Mercury is retrograde?
I'll leave it. Okay.
And Mars moon today.
Hey, can you see? Do you see the chart now?
Like Aubrey's voice. Yes, yay! All right, I'm gonna mute myself.
There it is.
Worked.
Okay, there it is.
Okay, all right. Everybody, we must be polite and quiet now, I guess. Okay. All right. So this is Tony's chart.
So the moon, as you can see, okay, is the midpoint between Mercury and the sun, as well as, what do you call that? The containment planet?
Yes. It's the middle planet in the containment. Yes.
Right. And it's the ruler of the ascendant.
Yeah. I would, in case you haven't figured it out, Tony is one of those rare individuals who's actually what would be considered a triple.
Right.
Sun, moon, and ascendant all in the same sign. So.
Right.
So what's interesting here is that the way here's how you would look at the chart from a containment perspective, right? So if we start at Aries and we simply work our way around, we see that the first planet we encounter is Mercury. And so we see that Mercury, moon, sun. So the moon is contained between Mercury and the sun. But at the same time, then, as you keep going, you'll see that the sun is contained between the moon and Venus.
Mm-hmm.
Venus is contained between the sun and Mars. Mars is contained between Venus and Uranus.
Mm-hmm.
Uranus is contained between Mars and Pluto. Pluto is contained between Uranus and Jupiter.
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter is contained between Pluto and Neptune.
So what do you? Okay, so what do you make of that, Jim?
Yeah. What happens is
I don't understand containments. So
well, the idea of containment is that you look at all three planets as part of, as a piece of the pie, if you would.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at okay, so we have Pluto in Leo, we have Jupiter in Virgo, and we have Neptune in Libra.
Mm-hmm.
So using those 12 the points that Spencer made about stelliums, we know that, for example, the sun rules Leo, so the sun is going to be influencing Pluto. Mercury is ruling Jupiter and Virgo, and Venus is ruling Neptune and Libra. Now, using the premise of Pluto as the foundation, Jupiter as the fulcrum, the balance point, and Neptune as the destination, you then start blending them together. Now you're covering the second, third, and fourth houses. So you have to consider the signs, the rulerships, the houses that are involved as well. But yeah, the bottom line is, okay, so if Pluto's the foundation, what then do we think of Pluto? What is Pluto about? Pluto wants us to become our purest version of ourselves.
Yes.
Jupiter likes to expand and give us what we want. Neptune, on the other hand, can tend to fog things up, create illusions, delusions, cause us to dissociate sometimes. And in this case, Neptune happens to be retrograde. Now, one of the things that they don't talk about in the containment book so much is they really don't look at retrogrades as being any different. Okay, so don't consider retrogrades per se. But what you have to think in terms of, I think, is that you have Pluto making a sextile to Neptune. So you keep in mind that sextile.
Yeah, all the aspects from Pluto are sextiles to Mercury, to the moon, and to Neptune.
Right. So you also have that sextile from Mercury to Pluto. You have the trine from Mercury to Neptune. There's a whole lot of stuff that gets played in. Now, those are generally considered soft, easy, favorable aspects. And you have Jupiter and Neptune moving towards each other. Do you see that?
Right.
Okay, because Jupiter's direct going counterclockwise. Mercury retrograde is going to be going clockwise. So they're actually in a double applying situation towards some aspect. And a major Ptolemaic aspect that would come up is going to be the conjunction, but that's a long ways off because of the time frame. So it's over probably a year or more away. So what you look at is, how do these three planets then play together in this sequence? We have this foundational planet, Pluto, in the second house in Leo, where it's like we like attention, we like to be recognized, Leo. But the second house is about our personal values. It's about the talent we have. It's that innate skill we may have. It's about how we make money, how we value things. We have Jupiter and Virgo. Virgo tends to be analytical and sometimes overly critical. And so, Jupiter there is like, one could tend to, if one expands on that, one could become overly critical. Neptune.
Well, it serves, because it's the third house.
Yes.
It with all that water and with a very, very Neptune ruled chart. I have Neptune aspecting everything in my chart, plus the stellium in the 12th, plus Pisces on the midheaven. What the Jupiter in the third has done, it's helped with my writing. It's given me that editing function. It also helps, of course, as an astrologer in terms of nuances, being able to see details. So with all that Neptunian energy, it's about the only thing that grounds the mystic in me into the earth plane, quite frankly.
Yeah, because it is really your only earth in your chart. There's that's a sense of how you can look at those three together, and in terms of from the containment perspective.
So I guess I'm still not clear what that means. Like, what are you saying that?
Well, I think what happens is together the first planet, Pluto, which serves as that foundation for Jupiter and your writing editing skills, with the ultimate goal, if you would, of the concept of Neptune in Libra, Libra being connecting with the masses, with the others, and Neptune about trying to reach things on a somewhat higher plane, a more, oh, good Lord, I hope that wasn't me.
Oh. We can still see you and hear you.
Oh, goody. I can see me too. Okay. So you look in terms of trying to clear away that Neptunian fog so that people can understand, to make it understandable for the masses.
Right.
because you're trying to reach a large audience with your writing. It's not
Right.
just about writing for person A, who, you know, a client. It's also about trying to create it in a way that others can understand it.
Right. Exactly.
And so I think it's, what happens is they're supportive of it. The two other planets, how do they support the middle planet?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you see you've got Jupiter, Neptune, Saturn. So now Neptune is in the middle and it gets support from Jupiter and Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
So that Saturnian energy on the other side of Neptune, the grounding, the need for clarity and control helps to contain the Neptune from becoming too, you know, getting off too much into the ethereal ethers and becoming perhaps somewhat confusing to people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And where it really, this is where containment really throws in a big curveball, is that Mercury is contained between Saturn and the moon. And Saturn is like over 180 degrees away, but there's no planets in between. And so this retrograde Saturn in the 5th house in Sagittarius is the foundation off of which Mercury in Gemini in the 12th has pushed off. It's the foundation for Mercury. And so again, that Saturnian grounding energy, even though it's in a mutable fire sign, it helps to ground you into that fiery energy that you need to go with all of your water.
Yeah, it also went direct, you know, in the progress chart about 18 years ago.
Okay, what shifted around that time for you? Anything?
I went through, it was the end of my 3rd near-death experience. You know, this chart with all those 12th house planets, as you can see, there's also Ceres in the 12th, the part of fortune is in the 12th, that with North Node in Scorpio, it's been a lifetime of death, rebirth, path of wounded healer, having to take on illnesses no one could treat and finding my own answers. So there's been that very, you know, I took on in this lifetime to clear all karma, really.
Yeah.
And so many physical challenges. From the time I went on the shamanic path at age 30, it all started. All of the physical challenges began. So at age 45, I was just coming out of almost dying from mold in my house.
I'm sorry, if you've already said this, but what do you ascribe to the physical challenges and the untreatable or situations that you had to figure out how to treat? What do you ascribe to that? What was that?
One of the aspects of Scorpio is research, you know, to be a researcher, you know, and my North Node in Scorpio, everything that couldn't be treated, like the first thing was Epstein-Barr when I was 30. And I went on my own journey to get the answers. And so each time I've had some massive physical challenge that couldn't be treated through allopathic medicine, I went to find those answers. So the very last one, which he was asking about what happened when Saturn went direct, was my house in Santa Monica. I don't live in California any longer, but when I was living in Santa Monica, I had a house near the beach that became infected with mold. I didn't know what was going on. I was getting very sick. And we finally determined, this was in 2001, that it was an environmental toxicity. And the lab work showed mold exposure through the roof. And the doctors basically told me there's nothing we can do. 20 years ago, they didn't know what to do.
Where's your Chiron?
In the 8th.
What degree?
At 16 Aquarius, and it's a T-square to the north and south node.
16 Aquarius in the 8th house is very significant. Yeah.
So what is your take on that in the 8th house?
Yeah, I wondered why it was left out. 16 Aquarius.
Well, it's a skip step in evolutionary astrology.
Yeah, it's a very significant planetoid, asteroid to look at your deepest wounds, and you're talking about them. So I thought I'd ask where it was.
Yeah, yeah. So this is that path, and of also learning, with it being in square to the ruler of the North Node, with being in the house that is the ruler of the North Node and square to the North Node. It's been a lesson of how to receive help, how to be able to, that what illness each time forced me to do was to reach out and get help.
Well, also, I feel like the 8th house is also about, bring me the death that I need. It's all about death, like as you clearly stated in your first sentence, your near-death experiences on repeat.
Right.
Right. And also one of them was mold, which is something that grows in dark, subterranean, underground, Hadean places like the underworld.
And I was in a hard Neptune transit at the time. Neptune was transiting the 6th, opposing my Mars.
Yeah, but if we just sit on that, I think there's a lot of interesting aspects, but just sitting with the Chiron and taking a moment to acknowledge that.
Absolutely.
And it's an Aquarius, air. I'm curious if these things were in community groups.
Personally, I would associate your health issues. Well, I would relate them, of course, naturally to the 6th house and the rulership being Jupiter in Virgo, which I think is in some sort of debility. But it is also square. It looks like your Mercury, and Mercury to me represents, air quality, the lungs, breathing, respiratory issues. It makes a square to your Jupiter, which is in Virgo, which is also ruled by Mercury yet again. And the Jupiter rules your 6th house cusp. And that to me personally represents your health challenges, which you would have had many because of Jupiter ruling.
So in the Placidus system, Saturn is actually just 1 degree away from the 6th house cusp.
Wow.
Yeah, so I just
Gemini and Mercury and Gemini talking, mentating lots about it, but feeling it, healing it in the physical body is really essential.
I'd like to add on to that. I think I totally agree with that 6th house interpretation, because I have Mars and Jupiter and Capricorn in there, and I've had a lot of weird, strange, undiagnosable things, and I can be a bit of a hypo because of course Jupiter's debilitated there and agitating things. So there's a lot of correlations between what you're saying, and I'm connecting it back to my chart because I see relationships between that Jupiter and the square. So
well, the reason I specified the fact, the reason I think that her health issues were more difficult to diagnose, they were strange, is because of that association between the ruler of the 6th house and the 12th house, which is the house of all that is unseen.
Neptune. Totally.
Exactly. It's, released to Neptune. But also we have to keep in mind, Jupiter is also the traditional ruler of Pisces. And so it also rules her midhaven. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of your health, the health scares and circumstances that you've gone through have played some role in contributing to your career and the work you do.
Excuse my French, but no shit, Sherlock.
Oh, I love it. I love you. I have Mercury and Gemini in the 12th too. You're so similar to me. I love it.
So I've written 2 books, and been on Gaia Network a number of times because I've shared, through the media, how I've used my Venus in the 1st house in trine to my midheaven is to have a projection, a persona that was likable and, attractive to the masses in order to get some very unconventional kind of information out there. If I had looked too woo-woo, if I was a person who looked really woo-woo, looked like a spiritual hippie, I would never have been able to talk about the things that I've talked about, and reached, people from 17 countries, which I did on Gaia when I shared my own path of the wounded healer, the past 30 years.
That. Jupiter in the 3rd house. That's what it does.
Right. And the ruler of the 9th and the 10th. So definitely everything that I've learned everything like the viruses that I've gotten, and there's been a number of them where the doctors will say there's nothing we can do for this, it's viral. And I've gone about getting the answers and helping people with certain simple herbs and that they didn't know about that can turn something around like that. For example, shingles. Monolaurin is an amazing product. Everyone should have it on hand, quite frankly.
Everybody, yep, for sure.
Very powerful.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to jump back in. And we'll try it. So I think there's a couple of good points that have come out here from this discussion, and I think it's great, is that one, there's more than one way to skin the cat in astrology in terms of finding a reason for or indicators for. And it kind of goes back to the rule of threes. In order for something to manifest or be shown, to be promised in a chart, there has to be at least 3 indicators for it. But the other thing too is that it shows that literally you have to consider the whole chart, whether you're looking at containments, at general aspects, or whatever you're looking at. Now the question as to why isn't Chiron there? Well, it's really a rather simple answer, that being that a book was written in 1980 and there wasn't much written about Chiron, and Chiron's not part of the book. So I figured let's not confuse things up too much by putting Chiron in here.
Oh.
So yes, the idea is if you get a handle on what we're talking about with containment and the ways you can look at containment, then you can use any point, any physical object. You know, you can put Chiron in there, you can put in your asteroid, and you can use the same process to analyze how that plays out.
Right.
So for example, if you've got Chiron in Aquarius, it's contained between Saturn and Mercury.
I still don't understand, Jim, what that means though. Okay, so use that as an example. So, okay, Chiron is contained between Saturn and Mercury. So how does that translate?
How would I translate that?
Yeah.
Okay. Put that there so I don't lose my.
Great points, Jim.
Oh, look.
Okay.
He put
See, I look at Chiron as being much more than the wounded healer.
Yeah.
Okay. Oops. Let me go back to here's an example. Yeah, let me go back to that so we don't get.
I want to see her chart.
Back on that.
Aha.
So in this case, now Chiron becomes the fulcrum, balance point between Saturn, the need for, now keep in mind, remember, Saturn is Chiron's father.
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things that Chiron does, Chiron and Uranus is Saturn's father, and Chiron orbits between Saturn and Uranus. So Chiron is kind of like, in some ways, the mediator, the family arbiter, between his father and his grandfather. He's the third generation trying to bring resolution and resolve conflicts between generations. So in that sense, you can look at a generational idea with Chiron. So with Mercury being the communicator and Saturn being stern taskmaster, stubborn, very set in his ways, what Chiron is trying to, in this scenario, I would say would be to find ways to open the minds of those who may be somewhat fixed and help them to understand that there is more than one way, as they used to say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Though I don't know why you'd want to do that. But there is more than, there's more than one way. It's not math where 1 + 1 is 2. So it's trying to create an atmosphere that allows you to find other ways of communicating, to try to reach those that tend to be more fixed in their ideas. So Chiron is the one that's trying to help you look for ways, because it's pushing off of Saturn for that communication. So in this way, Chiron acts more from the standpoint involved with communication, I think, and way of thinking, because Mercury is also about how our mind works. And so it's trying to get that to open up. And being where it is, it's, you know, it's not in an exact opposition to Pluto, but it's opposite Pluto by sign. And, you know, it's in Aquarius, it's a sign that was ruled by Saturn, currently assigned to Uranus. But so Saturn, yeah, it has some control because his sun is in his sign. But at the same time, the sun is trying to break away from the father and express his own uniqueness, his own individuality. So there's also that aspect of things where you're trying to go beyond the generation before you.
And your read on it being opposite Pluto, you know, the wide opposition to Pluto, what do you, I didn't quite follow that one particular piece.
Again, personally, I like the definition that Dane Rudhyar gave to Pluto, which is about purity. It's about Pluto, when we talk in terms of the Pluto as a transformer, wants us to become our purest true self, who we're meant to be, who we wanted to be when we came into this life, our reason for being here. And so Chiron is a teacher. Chiron was a student, a teacher, a healer, in the sense that he taught healing and medicine. He wasn't best known as a healer during his time, I don't think. Mythologically, he also was, you know, he sacrificed himself. And if you look at it, you can find a number of parallels between the Chiron story and that of Jesus.
He was also a musician and astrologer.
Yes, I was gonna say it.
Are you talking about Chiron or Jesus?
Yeah, Chiron. Oh, well, I don't know Jesus. I mean, I don't know, but Chiron.
Yeah, I mean, Chiron was all those things.
I'll tell you what I have found with Chiron is with people who come into my life who, like Sun and Aquarius people, they have a way I can actually feel the chironic wounding being triggered by, I have a friend who's 3 times over New York Times bestselling author. You know, she wrote the foreword to my last book. And she has, you know, she has 8th house wired. I'm not kidding, wired in terms of, you know, having many different kinds of multiple incomes through personal development, through her books, through her massive workshops that she gives, and, you know, 500 people sign up. When we have a conversation, I literally feel that wounding of my blockage, my 8th house blockage of this South Node in Taurus, working hard all the time, having to work hard for the money. And she just has the passive income thing just wired. So you can really feel your Chiron wounding when someone's shining a light through their own, you know, whatever that, you know, that in this case, it's Aquarius, you know, energy.
Yeah. Another way of something you can do to look at these as far as from a containment standpoint, you can, for example, look at what does a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, what do they say about Jupiter-Pluto conjunction? Okay. And then what did they say about Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions? Okay. And look at it as though what you're dealing with here is Jupiter is, in this case, it's now that transitional planet where you're moving from the idea of the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction to the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. But as Spencer talked about when going through the how you analyze stellium, with Neptune in Libra, which you have intercepted, that Neptune is a bit muted. So it's not going to be as strong as it might be otherwise. So those are all, you know, little factors that you can take into consideration. But I would look at, and I would say, like for the Mercury, you know, Saturn, Mercury, Moon, for example, What's a Saturn-Mercury conjunction about? What's a Mercury-Moon conjunction about? Because you're moving from the Mercury-Saturn conjunction to the Mercury-Moon conjunction, and you're a lot closer to the Mercury-Moon conjunction. So it's almost like you're getting to the end point of that whole transformation that comes from the Saturn-Mercury conjunction.
Okay.
Uh,
All right, I
running-
got to jump. I thank you, and hopefully this was helpful for everyone else as well.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye, Tony.
All right,
Thank you.
bye.
Okay.
I have a
Right, so here's
question,
the-
James.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you don't mind, it's just okay, and I think I'm just gonna allude and touch on. I don't know who it was that made the comment, but whoever it was before Tony, she had indicated that, you know, she still didn't really grasp fully the concept of the meaning behind planets in containment. And so my question is, what would you say? I mean, of course, I'm smart. Noel Till talks about this a lot, or he did, rest RIP. But you know, I'm familiar with it. I can figure it out. But I feel like for the sake of everyone being able to have a clear, concise understanding of what it is we're talking about, what would you say is the actual interpretive significance of looking at planets in containment in a chart? Like, why? Why would we? What's the point? I'm playing the devil's advocate, by the way.
It's like everything in astrology can add a layer to something. You can look at a chart and you can just read the chart shape, for example. What is the configuration of the chart? Or you can look at a given planetary pattern. Oh, I see you've got a grand trine, and you can focus on those things. And it's just another thing to add some flavoring, perhaps, or perhaps add some, bring some understanding to how something that's not necessarily clear for somebody.
Okay. For instance, like if we look at a chart, a natal chart, we see a locomotive, you know, Mark Edmonds planetary pattern, then we would just, you know, based on his interpretation, we would assume, oh, okay, we see a locomotive chart. This person is driven. They're, you know, they want to be successful, etc. If we see a grand trine, oh, this person probably has a good amount of luck, harmony, but they probably are passive, lazy, and have inertia related to those 3 different house matters and topics in the planets that form the, you know, or are related to the grand trine configuration. But so with that said, what would you say in short? Now I know this is difficult because I just gleaned that the author of this book actually wrote about 900 or 990 interpretations for all of these different planets in containment. So I know you can't give us everything, but in general, like what would you say? Like, okay, so we get it. Grand trine means good luck, harmony, gifts, laziness. What do planets in containment mean? You know, like what does that mean in general, if you know?
Okay. If you look at containment from the perspective of a beginning, a middle, and an end, you can make a little story out of them. And it all depends on 3 planets and where the beginning is, where the middle is, and where the end is. Yeah, the slide that's up, if you can see it, Venus, Mars, Uranus. This is from Tony's chart. And this is just a little synopsis of how their book is set up. So they start out by talking about their general interpretation of this trio. And they look at Uranus, Mars, Venus as very different. Okay, so the sequence is significant. That's why there's 990 combinations in the book. It starts out by saying these individuals need to feel a sense of reward for their initiative. And then it goes on with quite a bit more. And then they provide a positive and then a negative definition, if you would, of this potential for this combination. The positive being efficient work habits serve as a basis for the release of creative energy. The negative, self-indulgence, can lead to erratic actions. And so that's, if you had the book, you could read that and then use that to try to say, well, gee, I feel like I'm more positive than negative. And I mean, what I literally did when I started working with this was to go through the book and all of my combinations with the 10 planets and say, okay, I'm more positive, more negative, kind of a balance in between, to get a sense of it. The problem is, of course, the book is not readily available, and it's $200 if you can find it.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is provide us a way that you can look at these planets and try to make perhaps some sense out of them. I mean, look here, we've got here's another.
Can I just say a couple of things?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, Carolyn, just a minute. Carolyn?
Okay, well, I had heard, and it's so in my chart, and someone briefly mentioned it, that if you have a major stellium, which I do in the 7th house of 4 planets, and they are square, those planets are almost exactly square my nodes, that in order to really manifest moving towards my north node or balancing the nodes, I need to really work with the containment or the stellium. The more I take that to whatever you want to call it, I work with that or manifest it at a higher level, then the more I'm able to work with balancing the nodes. Is that something, I'd heard that a couple of places too.
Right, it's called bending the nodes.
Jim?
Yeah, the midpoint between the nodes is referred to as the bending. Yeah, Cornelia, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say something about, I understand the difficulty of understanding, but I understand better now because you did send me the pages that had to do with mine and my chart that I thought we were going to do today, because I could explain exactly what they mean, because I found that every one of them was true. It just added a lot more to my knowledge why I had to go from this place to that place to the other place.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go way out on a limb here. Since if you don't have the book, and probably most of you don't, and you would like to know what your planetary containments are, you can email me, and I'm in the process of actually scanning the pages from the book. And as I get them done, I will put them together. I will send you those pages so you can see what the book says about them. Yeah. In the meantime, you know, again, it's without the book, you won't be able to deal with any. I can send you your pages, but you may have, you know, if you encounter somebody else with a containment that's different, you're going to be having to figure it out for yourself. And so that was kind of what we're trying to do here, was give you some tools, techniques, considerations for how to look at them as you then incorporate that into understanding the parts of your, you know, your chart. Keep in mind that because we're dealing with houses, these are going to kind of reflect where these things are going. This is going to play out in your life, and which can create, you know, when you have a wide empty space, as most people probably do. For example, the chart that we have here, we see the sun contained between Mars and Uranus, and there's, you know, the first, second, the third house. Look at 3 houses that are empty, but the houses that are involved are the 12th and the 4th. And so they become the significant houses. Signs involved are Capricorn and Gemini. So this gives you a sense of where the focus for this comes in. So when you see the sun in the 12th house, where does your mind go? You know, one of the things I might ask is like, well, what was your relationship like with your father? You know, we think 12th house, son, father. Hey, maybe the father was absent, wasn't around a lot, wasn't there at all. Who knows? But then when you go and you throw in Uranus in the 4th house, and you've got Mars next to the sun in the 12th house, you know, so the sun is pushing off Mars and it's heading towards Uranus. That can add a different perhaps a different flavor to it. Perhaps the father wasn't there as a father, but was more there as a mother than the father. Took on the role of the mother because there was no mother, perhaps, or perhaps it was a role reversal because you have the moon basically, opposite Uranus in the 10th house. Those are some kind of things that you can start to play with in your mind as you try to work with this concept of the containment.
This is just to add something. This is interesting. I knew somebody who also had the same exact planets in the 12th house, Sun, Moon, Mercury. I'm sorry, Sun, Mars, Mercury, but they were in Aquarius. And it was also a similar situation where the father was not particularly present. So it's interesting how that comes out. And also, I would say that person wasn't aware or projected their emotions or whatever was going on onto people without knowing. So there's a lot of fogginess in regards to that type of situation. So yeah, that's interesting that you said that.
Jim, this is Rita.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay. So I think I had a good insight into my chart because I have what? 4 planets in Chiron in the 9th house. And finally, it took me a long time to get there, but now being the 9th house and what I do feels like rolling off a log. Before it felt like climbing a mountain. And the Chiron wounding was becoming the Jungian analyst. And because my analyst, he read his chart and my chart, it was like, until I got that inside myself, I was constantly wounded about that. Now, I still have the empty places with the money and stuff, which is I'm trying to solve now. But looking at that, I went, because I have Mars and Venus and Neptune, and what do I have? Jupiter and Chiron, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like, and somebody told me probably, I don't know, 40 some odd years ago that when I got into this area that everything would be just where I was supposed to be. And I'm looking at them going, not when I was in my 30s. I had no idea I was going to be doing this.
Yeah. Okay, so here's, again, a little part, some of the blurb from the book on the Mercury-Mars-Sun combination where Mars is contained between Mercury and the Sun. These individuals tend to scatter their constructive energies through an inconsistency in applying themselves. Positive inherent flexibility helps in the actualization of goals and objectives. Negative, inconsistent efforts scatter vital energies. Now, keep in mind that these definitions and explanations are written without regard to sign or house, or rulerships, or any of that idea. So everything has to be then blended with that context. Because in this case, the 3 of them are in the 12th house in Capricorn, and that's going to tend to skew things in a more, in a different way, let's put it that way. The 12th house, we tend to be more private. We tend to not share as well, but also it's about dealing with individuals and institutions and the like. It's the nature of the kind of 12th house activities. And in Capricorn, we're looking at cardinal earth sign. So it's grounded, but it wants to move forward. It's considered a good business sign. So those are factors that need to be brought into play. And if we go back and look at the chart, we can see that the only real aspect is their stellium as a conjunction with Mercury and Mars sextiling back to Jupiter. Sun, you can give it to the Sun because it's not that far off. So the stellium basically is sextiling Jupiter, and so that also then plays into how that stellium and how that Mars containment comes out, because Mars is the old ruler of Scorpio where Jupiter is sitting. But then you also have to look at, well, what does a sextile represent? And it's a lot more than half a trine or an generally kind of easy flowing thing. Let's see where we're at here. Okay, so there's Cornelius' chart. some comments there. I want to move on to one thing here. So in this is the full text of what it says in the book about the sun being contained between Pluto and Jupiter. And that's an unusual containment because Mercury and Venus never get that far from the sun. And so it's a bit unusual for one of them, at least one of them, not to be involved in this containment of the sun. So these individuals tend to feel that they can never think big enough. Their goal and purpose in life centered around expansion, as opposed to accepting any state of affairs as adequate. They should go ahead and allow projects to grow their control, for it is not in their nature to hold back or contain energy. They may be egocentric, but if they project this with any magnanimous, sweeping flair, they will evoke enthusiasm in others and function as a positive influence. On a positive side, enthusiastic expression of personal intensity opens the way to success. On the other hand, obsessive involvement in too many areas makes it difficult to maintain a balance. But again, this is without reference to
Oh, look,
the placement.
this is what I wanted to see.
Okay, so here,
well, I have to
see here
leave.
that's-
Goodbye, James. Goodbye, everyone.
Okay, bye. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for
Thank you
your
for the
contributions.
content. I'm sorry about the little hiccups and everything. It was a great.
Me
great.
too.
You're doing great.
What a Mercury retrograde. Wow. Good news is it won't be retrograde next month.
You're doing great. I enjoyed it. Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. So here we have the three of them are in Cancer. So we have to also consider where's the moon and what's it doing. Well, as it happens, the moon is in Leo. So we have the sun moon mutual reception. And the stellium overlaps between the first and second house. So it's not just about first house issues, it's also about second house things. So all of those come into play when you then read one of the interpretations from the book, and you can say, okay, but I got to figure these factors in as well. And then if you really want to go deeper, then you factor in, the aspect from other planets.
It's interesting that these three charts all had Cancer and Capricorn.
It is. And even though their age differences are very substantially, let's see, hang on, here we go. There was that one, okay. Here we go. Additional points on containment. I'm trying to wrap this up because it's after 2.
Oh my goodness.
So when you're looking at containment, you just go through zodiacal order. And you can start anywhere you want to start, but just remember to go then in zodiacal order or counterclockwise around your chart. For containment purposes, you only consider actual physical bodies, such as planets, but you can consider asteroids, centaurs, even fixed stars if you want to get into that. They can all contain because they're physical. It's like the bread in a sandwich. It contains the filling. And you consider any three sequential physical bodies. Sensitive points, such as angles, nodes, house cusps, black moon, etc., cannot contain, but they can be contained. Because they have no substance, they can't contain something.
Daddy, boo-boo, you need
But they can be contained by something. And the book actually provides definitions for containment of the midheaven and the ascendant. Now, there is an exception in my world to that rule. And that one exception is when all 10 planets are on one side of the nodes. Okay, so the planets are all contained by the nodes. So if you got the nodes in your chart, you show the nodes, and if all 10 planets are on one side of the nodes, then you have a nodal, then they are contained by the nodes. And then in terms of how would you look at that, you have to consider, well, are they contained between the north and the south or between the south and the north? keep in mind that the nodes move backwards. And so you would, your sense there goes in the opposite, is the opposite of, yeah, in my chart, I have my south node, 12th house Sagittarius. North node is 6/7th house Gemini, and all of my planets are in between the two. So my containment is between the south and the north node, because as time passes, the south node will transit over all of those planets before the north node does. So that's kind of how you look at it in terms of the movement of things.
Can I say one quick thing?
Sure.
This is really basically new to me, but I looked on the computer before coming on to this, the webinar, and I, I don't want to go into all my details. We don't have time, but I have a stellium in the 7th house, 4 planets in Libra, and what that was interpreted as is, and it makes sense. It says nothing stresses people with this feature more than a lack of symmetry or balance, and that would make sense. But I mean, I'm just beginning to understand this, so it just yeah. So and because I know that that I have different areas of my life, so it's not just in terms of relationships. But if I start to get too much in one area, it's like, I'm starving this other baby over here, or I'm starving the music, or I'm starving, the healing. And so I have to stop and then go to the other one. So it made sense to me, that's all. And this is pretty important, it feels like. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. The other thing another way this can help is if you have, for example, if you've got a 4-planet stellium or a 5-planet stellium, by using the containment method where you look at them in threes, that may help you to get a better sense of the overall impact of that 4 or 5-planet stellium.
Look at it in threes. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, okay, let me.
Jim, just a question to be clear. The stelliums themselves have essentially nothing to do with containment. We're just looking at what planets fall between what planets.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we started with stelliums only because they're an easy example of what we mean by containment. Because you've got 3 planets in sequence close together.
Okay.
And so you look at the middle, we're talking about the middle planet in a 3-planet stellium. But, okay, so here's Cornelia's chart again. Okay, and so she's got, we see Pluto at 20 Cancer, the Sun at 22, Jupiter at 29. We have the Moon at 3 Leo and Mercury at 10 Leo. So they're all within 7 degrees of the next planet or less. So you literally have this 5-planet powerhouse. How then how can you make more sense out of that? One way is to look at the Sun contained between Pluto and Jupiter, Jupiter contained between the Sun and the Moon contained between Jupiter and Mercury. And if you want to then, and you look at Pluto as the foundation of this grouping, with Mercury as the destination, if you would, being, I'm coming from my Pluto where I need to make, I need to become me. And Mercury is my objective, Mercury being that highest sense of mental and communication abilities. This is where I want to go and become, so that I can express things from a 1st, 2nd house nature to the world, perhaps, or just to understand it for myself.
The Jupiter conjunct the Moon was, my moods are always dependent on whatever is happening. No matter what it is, if I'm sad, then everything is sad. If I'm okay and I'm happy and I'm having, wow, this is great fun. But they can be overwhelming. And I think what it is that and Mercury forces you to stop and look at your emotions rather than letting them lead you everywhere.
Yeah. Now, another thing to look at here, and this is going beyond containment even, is what's the phase involved here? What phase are we in? Okay, so if we bring in, let's bring in Venus, but 12 degrees from Pluto, so it wouldn't be part of the stellium, but one could look at it as part of that because there's 4 planets. It's part of the 4 planets in Cancer. But where's the moon relative to Venus? It's about 25 degrees away. Okay, so the moon relative to Venus, Pluto, the sun, and Jupiter is all in a new moon phase. It's a new beginning. So the moon is just raced over, just gone over those 4 planets. And so it's all this new energy, this new beginning energy. But relative to Mercury, it's in the balsamic or ending phase. So it's like, think in terms of phases as well. When you look at aspects, think in terms of phases. Is it a first quarter square or a third quarter square? Is it a waxing aspect or a waning aspect? Because that changes the dynamic of the energy. Let me see if there's some other points I wanted to hit on. Okay, so here's some more thoughts. The first planet or body in sequence represents the past or the foundation for the 3 bodies. The second is the present, but also acts as the pivot point, the fulcrum and balance point for the 3. And the third body in sequence represents the future, that is the directional thrust of the 3. So when you're looking at, if you're looking at the second, the middle one, you look at the 3 of them, past, present, future, beginning, middle, end. It's where that energy is moving. Because then when you shift to the next trio, that shifts that energy pattern. So, if you move on to the next 3-planet sequence, your second planet becomes the first planet foundation, for which what was the third planet is now the middle planet. And then you bring in the 4th planet. Are you following me on that one?
Yeah.
One more time.
Okay, let me go back.
Just one more time.
So here we are. We have the Venus, Pluto, Sun containment in the first house. Venus is the foundation for Pluto pushing off, heading towards the Sun as the directional objective. Okay, and Pluto becomes the foundation for the Sun, whose direction goes towards Jupiter. The Sun becomes the foundation for Jupiter. Jupiter is the foundation for the Moon. The Moon is the foundation for Mercury, each pushing off and going to the next planet. Another way to look at this, if you're looking at it from a phase standpoint, Venus is in a balsamic phase to Pluto, which is in a balsamic phase to the Sun, which is in a balsamic phase to Jupiter, because it's shy of the conjunction. Now,
okay.
This is without regard to the speed of the planets. This is simply looking at, if you have this fixed picture and you pick any one of those points and you decide to move that planet, what then is its relationship to the first planet it's going to touch?
Okay.
Jim, do you look, I've thought it's always important because I have that stellium and it's the first quad. To me, that's your childhood up to, the school years. There was a lot going on in my life when I was young that I had to deal with the rest of my life. I think that's all that stuff in the first quad makes you very self-protective because you've had so much happen.
Those of you who are still here, hang on. Okay, so there's some other stuff here. Next month, we're going to talk about final dispositors, planetary signatures, and some other techniques. August, I've got a special guest coming in who developed a cloud-based astrology software application. He's going to demonstrate it for you. September, probably talking about Chiron. October, we may make a change in our meeting for October. So that's be discussed. Thank you. Spencer, you can reach Spencer Grendel1 at Yahoo. You can get to me at Jimmy_Eddie@hotmail.com. Okay, here we go. Stop sharing. Let's go back to our.
Nice to meet all you guys.
Okay, here's one thing I want to. Okay, so here's. Can you see this? No, let me get it in a position where it's visible. All right, here we go. There is another book that talks about containment, but it's called Planets in Combination.
Okay.
Okay. And it takes a very different approach. Literally what she has done in this book is each page is a planet, but what happens is you can actually say, okay, I have, what are we doing with Pluto, Sun, Jupiter. Okay, so on the one flap, we go and we find Pluto. It's awkward. Well, yeah, let's do it this way. Without regard to anybody's chart, you can literally, you see there's 3 sections to it. And what happens is when you find the first planet in the first grouping, your second planet in the second grouping, and your third planet in the third grouping. And the way she has it organized is verb, noun, adverb. And I mentioned this book mainly, not because it's a great book, but simply because it's available and it's not $400. But if you want to take a look for it, if you don't have it,
what is it again, Jim?
It's called Planets in Combination.
Planets in Combination.
By Lynn, L-Y-N-N-E, Berman, B-U-R-M-Y-N.
Is there a local astrological library?
Other than mine, none that I know of.
Can we come to your house?
No, but I can, if there's something you're looking for, what I can do is I'll send you a list of my astrology books.
Oh my gosh. That'd be awesome.
At least as complete as it currently exists. So there's probably there may be some in there that I may have some that aren't on the list. Let's put it that way.
We could peer in your windows then.
Well, what we can do is at some point we're going to get to meet in person, or maybe we can at least meet for coffee sometime. And so maybe if you want to borrow a book, we can arrange something. But I'll send you.
Oh yeah, or just like pop, get together and take a few shots with our smartphone for the chapter we want or something.
Yeah, for whatever you're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Show you something here. Okay, I don't. Early on in my astrology career, back before the internet was so widely used and so much was available, I love books because they're something physical you can hang on to.
Yeah.
The downside with the book, of course, is that it's something physical you can hang on to, and they have weight.
Yes.
And so, at some point, now I'm going more towards the ebooks if I can find them that way. And some of the physical books that I also have as ebooks because it's a lot easier to carry them in my computer. But okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I will find it. Here it is.
Thanks, Rodalina. She posted the link on Amazon for the book.
Just to say that's actually UK, Amazon UK. So it may be more expensive where you guys are, but maybe they can deliver to you. I don't know. And it's still going to be less than 100 or more.
Oh, really? Oh, wonderful.
I just checked for the UK version and it's showing me this.
Okay. So at any rate, I've got this list is sorted by author, and it's, I don't know, about 800 long or something like that.
That's your personal list, Jim?
Wow.
There's my personal list.
You're bragging about, I mean, sharing about?
Yeah, well, you know, like I said, I accumulated a lot of books early on. Back in the day when okay, what was the name of that place? The Bodhi Tree.
Yeah.
Oh,
LA people remember the Bodhi Tree?
Oh,
I loved their used bookstore. I would go to their used bookstore and I would, you know, scrounge through it and, you know, basically accumulate
That
books.
Bodhi tree was great. Yes.
I really miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, so that's kind of what I've got. But yeah, I will. Katrina, I'll send it to you, and Kate, you can go through it and see if there's something there you might be interested in browsing.
James, do you have a list of selected books, the ones that are your favorite?
My favorites, not really, though. I do have one that I like. I've got a few copies of it. Sometimes I have more than one copy of the book. Just either I bought it by mistake or because I wanted it. Let's see, which one is it?
No wonder you're so, we can never reach you to join our talks because you're so busy reading your 800 books.
Yeah. What the heck was it? I have to find it now to make sure I know what the name is. Thought I knew who the author was, but I think I'm Lewis.
So some of us are in Southern California, but some of us are in you're in Spain.
Yeah.
Rodalina,
Yeah, some of you are far away. I know.
There are some good online Astro databanks too now.
Yeah. Gee, I'll have to find. I must be misremembering the author's name because it's the one astrology book I own that I've actually read twice. I must confess I have not read any of these other books. I've not read any of them. I've read parts of some of them. Mostly they're, you know, and right now things are in a bit disarray, so it might take me a while to find something, but yeah. That's why I started going e-versions because they're easier to find.
Yeah.
I ran out of bookshelf space, so yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming and putting up with the technical difficulties. Thank you for staying with us. Spencer, what do you want to wrap it up?
Well, I don't know. I feel kind of intimidated by that list of books. That's
give us your benediction.
Yeah, please.
Well, I think that one of the things that we should really all applaud Jim with is that the way that he dealt with the concept of containments so that people who haven't read the book could understand what it was and all about. So I think we owe Jim a big round of applause.
Thank you all.
Thank him very much for this extraordinary thing. And I think that, I don't know, it almost seems like we should do it again without having the stellium part of it and just go into the
yeah, I think we can probably do this again and see if we can improve on how we deal with it.
Right.
If you have any questions, any requests, submit them to me and I will do my best to answer your question or provide you with the documentation to go along with what you're asking.
Okay, thank you.
But I think, you know, ideally, hopefully you've got an idea of what containment is about. It's just it's another tool for your astrological toolbox that can come in hand. It may help you to understand certain factors about yourself.
And, you know, we didn't talk about it, Jim, but I loved Cornelia's comments, which I put in the chat about how she had a huge stellium in her first and second house and how that first and second, how the primary years of her life were extremely informative. It sounded like.
Well, you know, and there's something we didn't talk about, but there's the other thing too, is like there's various timing techniques where you can look at the 12 houses and you can say, well, each house, you know, represents a time frame within your life. And you can go from a year per house to, you know, 6 or 7 years per house, 8 years per house, depending upon what you want to figure for a timeline. How many times you want to go around. But yeah, there's any number of ways of doing timing. Stellium. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that when you've got a tight grouping like that, is what happens with progression, particularly the progressed moon.
Progressed moon, yeah.
Because from her chart, boom, boom, going around, we're looking at about maybe 25 years or so, 25 to 26 years. The progressed moon is going to go over that, start going over that first and second house grouping of Cancer, Libra, Cancer, Leo planets. And then it's going to happen again around 52 to 55, 56. It's going to do it again. It will coincide with the progressed lunar return around 27 years and change. So you've got that coming in and really activating it, taking it up a notch, because yeah, early stelliums like that in a chart may not manifest right away because they're in that early part of the chart. There's any number of ways, variety of ways of looking at things and seeing them. So again, thank you all very much. The recording will be posted. The good news is that while I was losing internet connection, this was being recorded on the internet, so it shouldn't have affected the recording too much, other than my absence. And again, if you want the slideshow, drop me an email. It will be posted to our Facebook group, but you can drop me an email and I will send it to you. And thank you again, everybody. Appreciate your support, your tolerance, and your putting up with today's Mercury retrograde entertainment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, everybody take care, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Have a good June. Bye, everybody. Yes.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Adelina, I'll see you tomorrow.
I'll see you tomorrow, and I hope everyone joins. Whoever wants to join is welcome.
Yes.
Cool.
I'll send it out to our meetup group, all 900
Perfect.
some of them.
Thank you very much for the
You're
referral.
welcome.
Thank you. Hey, Jim, will you leave the Zoom up for a minute so that Rodalina and I can talk?
Oh, sure.
Awesome. And you're welcome to join us. Or if anybody wants to do post meetup convo. Because actually,
Right.
I met up with Rodalina. You could take it off the record.
Oh, I'll stop. Yes, I'll stop recording.
Yeah.
Where is it? Okay, there we go. Stop recording.
That was so
Yes.